Alright, so now I reset this file so we don't have any cuts and the materials are ready for draping. You can go here to your library and then you have fabric and you double click, and here you see a list of standardized materials that you can always find within Clo. Keep in mind that you can also use the Clo library and connect to maybe import new materials, but these are the standardized options. You can view them in icons, or you can click here this little list and it will show you the names of the materials. Okay, so regularly you have this cotton settings on the standard fabric. If we want to add another material, maybe I want to have the first one be cotton, I can drag and drop on top of it and it will apply the material. But I can also click add fabric and I will have a new material here, to which I could decide I want to add another cotton and drop it. And you see I have here cotton, the first one, the second one. And let's say for the last one I want to add cotton with stretch. I could either drop it directly on the pattern piece, or I can also drop it in the library. Okay, now you see that it's in the library because I dropped it directly, but it's not on a pattern piece because it wasn't selected. So I can select the pattern piece. This is the one I would like to add to it. I can download it. Now it's on the pattern piece that I wanted. This one the same. If I click on it, I see that it's still on the original fabric, but I wanted to have the heavy twill. So now I click download and the heavy twill is now on the material. If I would, for example, add a new material, it's important to know, as long as the material is not assigned to a pattern piece or an avatar, you can always delete it. When you don't see the option to delete the material, it means that it's still assigned to either a pattern piece or an accessory or an avatar. So I will delete this one because I don't need it anymore. And you see I have here fabric in the seam property editor. It's because these three still have that material on them. Okay, so now you see that I've added 3 different materials. The first thing I would like to do is to click on simulation. And this will show that the materials have different draping. This is because they have different physical properties. How can you check the physical properties? You can first stop your simulation, for example. Always when you're not simulating, please turn it off because it takes a lot of your computer time. Okay, so I have here, I selected cotton, satin, and I have here in the material property, you see here, material property, I can select if the material is on both sides or if I only want it on one side. And here you see material type is fabric matte. This is only the visual property that it will apply. So I can have a cotton material, but I say that it should look like metal or look like plastic. And you can select that option to look like plastic, for example. But you see here there are some options that show that it's in render only. That means that you cannot preview them either in the 2D or the 3D window. But in the case of plastic, you see that I can preview it already without having to go to render. In the 2D window, there's this little box. If you click on it, it will give an impression of what the material might look like when you render. And you see for this one, we chose for it to look like plastic, so you see that it's much more shiny. These are visual properties of the material. So if I select the other pattern piece and I want to edit the material, I could go here and do fabric like velvet. You see that it's looking much different. But since I want to have a comparison what the same material can do but with different properties, I can click and hold shift, click and hold shift, and I decide to download the plastic on those as well. And now you see they're all three having the same material, and you see as well that now these are not assigned, so I can delete them. Please try to always name your materials and try to keep them organized, because the more pattern pieces you have, the more difficult this will become. And since we're gonna do different settings, I would say click on the material, copy the first one, you can click copy again, and then maybe so I don't forget which one is which, I could say left, I could say I click and then I can type center, and I can click right. Now I know which one should be for which, but because they were all on the first one, I will see this one is left, click download, I'll click on this one, it has to be center, click download, this one has to be right, click download. Something very important to pay attention to is that you see here an arrow. That doesn't mean that's only showing the last material you were at. So only when it's a selection of both, you know that you are able to edit that specific material. Because I could, for example, be selecting this pattern piece on the left, and you see the last arrow was on the previous, but I am right now, the material for the right is this one. So please make sure that the selected pattern and where you're wanting to edit, it's both selected. Sorry, I will repeat that. So let's say you have here clicked on the right pattern piece, you see a mark on the center, but that's not the material for this one. The way you know that which material is for this pattern piece is that it will be highlighted in the name. Okay, so I click on it because I want to work with it. And now what I can do is scroll. You have physical property, and then open the arrow detail. And here you see that you have different blocks of how you can adapt the material. When it comes to weft and warp, it is the same as you're usually used to, from left to right and top to bottom. And the shear is the bias. So let's say I want to decrease the stretch of the weft, and I simulate. You see that it will drop differently. If I would increase the stretch of the weft and I simulate, you see that the drape is becoming less. So this way you are able to change the settings of your material. So if I simulate, you see that now here the stretch has changed completely. And if I would increase here and simulate again, you see that the material properties completely change and they're still all the same plastic. So by playing with the physical properties, it is possible to change the material and simulate again. And you see that it's starting to have some differences. If you want to reset the materials we had here, it was originally a cotton. You can put it back to the original material and you have the original settings. A good way to have an indication of what your material should look like is that in the physical property, there's also, just like on this left side, you had the visual properties of the material. Here it has the physical properties. What you can do is that you can play around with the different material settings. You see, I did now a silk. It will fall differently, and then you see how the stretch and weft are different and how the bias is different as well. If I change it to another material, let's say a polyester, you see the draping is completely different. And this is what you can achieve by playing around and trying the different material settings, and also by changing the visual settings.